Neglected mom secretly escapes to Bali, finds her true self, emotional empowerment story. Welcome back to her Fireside Stories. My name is Helen Brooks. I was a mother, a wife, and apparently the family maid with no right to feelings. On Mother's Day, my daughter took my husband to brunch and left me home to walk her dog. That night, I booked a one-way ticket to Bali. I didn't leave because I was impulsive. I left because I finally saw the truth. They didn't see me not as a woman, not as a person. And when my husband tried to claim my inheritance money, my mother gave me out of love. I knew I had a choice: disappear back into the shadows or fight for the life I'd buried long ago. This is my story. Helen Brooks had always believed in the quiet stability of everyday life. At 54, with neatly cropped silver hair that framed a warm face, she lived in a modest suburb of Portland, Oregon. On the surface, her life seemed calm, almost placid. She woke up early each morning, preparing coffee for Gary, her husband of 25 years, before packing a lunch for her daughter Rachel, who was 27, but still dropped by whenever she felt hungry or simply wanted to do laundry for free. Helen would then watch Rachel breeze out the door in a swirl of chatter about her next promotion, her latest travel plans, or the artisanal coffee shop she'd discovered downtown. Rachel reminded Helen of a hummingbird always buzzing from one sweet spot to another, never quite landing long enough to give a real hug. Meanwhile, Helen's in-laws, Arthur and May, lived just a few blocks away. They frequently stopped in for dinner, casually critiquing Helen's cooking or housekeeping. They didn't do it with overt malice, but their small digs. "Why do you put so much garlic in the sauce?" Or, "I thought you'd have dusted the mantel by now," chipped away at Helen's sense of self-worth over the years. She often found herself washing dishes at the sink, gazing out the window at the wide, sprawling maple tree in the backyard. That tree was there when Helen and Gary first bought the house, its branches strong and inviting. It served as a reminder of the early days when she imagined a home brimming with love, family dinners, and perhaps a garden bursting with herbs she'd use in the family meals. Somewhere along the line, those idyllic dreams had blurred into a routine that revolved around everyone else's needs. Helen didn't work outside the home. Gary, a mechanical engineer, insisted his job could comfortably support them both, so she stayed home to take care of things. The arrangement felt natural at first. Helen loved nesting, and taking care of Rachel felt deeply rewarding when Rachel was a child, but as Rachel grew older, leaving for college and then returning sporadically, Helen's role was reduced to an afterthought, or so it felt. She tried to busy herself with cooking elaborate meals, crocheting, and volunteering at a local animal shelter. Yet even there, people referred to her as Mrs. Brooks, as though her identity began and ended with her husband's name. This slow erosion of self was something Helen barely noticed until the painful day she realized she couldn't recall the last time she'd made a decision purely for her own happiness. In the back of her closet, she kept a small box of keepsakes: her old journals, a few photographs from her high school drama club, and random mementos of a time when she had bold dreams. She used to love acting, painting, even had a fleeting idea of opening a small bakery, but life chores and familial obligations overshadowed those ambitions. She sometimes wondered if her mother Dolores suspected how restless her daughter was. Dolores lived alone in Arizona, having sold the family ranch a few years prior. Though she visited Oregon for holidays, Helen had never shared her dissatisfaction openly. She didn't want to worry her mother or admit that the life she'd chosen might not fulfill her in the way she had once hoped. A crisp Saturday morning in May brought with it the promise of warmth and brighter skies. The floral shops and grocery stores across Portland buzzed with early shoppers preparing for the upcoming event. Mother's Day, Helen had been planning a small get-together for weeks, intending to make it special not just for herself, but for May, her mother-in-law, and Rachel. She wanted a day that celebrated 3 generations of women in the family, complete with a homemade brunch spread of waffles, fruit, and quiches. In the kitchen, she moved gracefully between tasks. She sifted flour, measured milk, and whisked the batter with the quiet efficiency that came from years of cooking meals for the people she loved. She inhaled the comforting aroma of fresh batter, feeling a flutter of anticipation in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, this year's Mother's Day would be different. Perhaps Rachel would set aside her phone long enough to notice the handmade place cards or the floral centerpieces. Perhaps Gary would give her a hug and a meaningful smile, acknowledging the decades she devoted to making their home a haven. And perhaps May would find a moment to compliment the waffles, just a single line of approval that Helen could hold on to, reminding her that the love she poured into cooking didn't go unseen. As if on cue, Gary trudged into the kitchen, still in his pajamas, rummaging through the refrigerator for orange juice. "You're up early," he remarked, voice tinged with mild surprise, but not quite warmth. Helen offered a soft smile. "I'm making waffles. Thought it'd be nice for Mother's Day tomorrow." He nodded absently, already sipping from a carton of juice. She tried not to feel disappointed that he didn't say more. Then Rachel arrived, pushing the front door open with her hip while juggling 2 paper coffee cups and a pastry bag. Helen's heart soared. Maybe Rachel had brought a treat for her mother. But Rachel breezed right past Helen, placing 1 coffee cup in front of Gary. "Dad, guess what?" she exclaimed, her fiery red hair swaying behind her. "Bradley and I are planning a trip to New Orleans for Memorial Day weekend. We found super cheap tickets." Helen gently wiped her hands on a dish towel. "Sounds exciting," she said. "Did you get that second coffee for?" Before she could finish, Rachel thrust the extra cup into her own bag. "Oh, I got them both for me. One's a caramel mocha, the other is just black coffee, for when I need an extra kick." She giggled, oblivious to Helen's faltering smile. Helen cleared her throat. "So, tomorrow I thought maybe we could do a special brunch for Mother's Day." Rachel brightened. "Oh, shoot, that's tomorrow?" "Actually, Dad and I just made a reservation downtown at that new steakhouse. It's a little Mother's Day celebration, right, Dad?" Gary nodded in agreement. Helen forced a small laugh. "Oh, that's nice, but I was actually thinking we'd do something here at home, a 3-generation. "That reminds me," Rachel interrupted. "Could you watch Chessie for me next weekend? Bradley hates dog hair in his car, and we're driving out to the coast." Chessie was Rachel's spoiled terrier mix. In that moment, Helen felt the air thicken. There she was planning a heartfelt Mother's Day celebration, only to find out her husband and daughter had decided on a steakhouse without consulting her. Worse, Rachel just assumed Helen would be available for dog sitting the following week. It was as if Helen's schedule, her desires, her presence, none of it mattered. She forced a polite nod. "I'll think about it," she murmured. Rachel didn't even pause to acknowledge the subdued tone. Instead, she breezed off to rummage through the hall closet for one of Gary's old jackets, mumbling something about needing a spare layer for her upcoming trip. Gary shrugged and headed to the living room to catch a sports recap. Helen found herself standing by the kitchen island, staring blankly at the waffle batter that now felt like a pointless endeavor. The clock ticked toward noon, and the day's light streamed through the window in golden shafts illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. She could hear Rachel humming in the other room, footsteps excitedly tapping on the hardwood. Mother's Day wasn't going to be about celebrating Helen after all. It would be about going to a fancy restaurant, one she hadn't chosen, and continuing the routine in which her contributions were taken for granted. Later that afternoon, Helen drove to the local grocery store to pick up last-minute items she still thought she might need for Sunday. An internal voice told her to cancel the brunch plan altogether, but another part of her resisted. Perhaps in some quiet corner of tomorrow, there'd be a small moment of recognition for her efforts. She felt silly yearning for appreciation, as if it was too self-indulgent to want a kind word or a simple thank you. She took her time wandering the aisles. The grocery store was bustling with families picking out cards, flowers, chocolates, tokens of gratitude for their mothers. Helen paused at a vibrant display of pink peonies, her favorite flower, and ran her fingertips over the delicate petals. The softness reminded her of her own mother, Dolores, who used to have a patch of peonies in their backyard in Arizona. She remembered the smell and how Dolores would cut a few to place in a crystal vase on the dining table. Suddenly, Helen felt an ache for that simpler time, for the warmth of a house, where she was loved without conditions or dismissive shrugs. It was at that display that the idea formed in her mind, perhaps she should call Dolores. They spoke occasionally, but never about the deeper pains in Helen's life. Dolores was older now, living in a small apartment in Flagstaff. Helen often felt guilty she couldn't visit more. She glanced at her phone, half tempted to call right then, but decided to wait until she was somewhere quieter. Mother's Day dawned with an unseasonably warm sun. Helen got up earlier than usual, determined to maintain a hopeful mood. She quietly gathered her waffle ingredients, eggs, flour, a dash of sugar, and began to whip up the batter. She wanted to incorporate a hint of orange zest, something that would make these waffles truly special. A sweet citrus fragrance began to fill the kitchen, and for a moment her spirits lifted. Then she heard footsteps, and Gary emerged with a concerned expression. Rachel texted me. She's leaving in about an hour to pick up Bradley. They're going to the steakhouse earlier than we planned. Helen's whisk slowed, but we haven't even had our brunch yet. It's Mother's Day. She heard the tremor in her own voice, a tiny quiver that signaled hurt. Gary offered a shrug. We can do brunch later this week, can't we? No big deal? Something snapped inside Helen. It was as though all the unspoken disappointments, years of them converged into this single moment. She set the whisk down carefully. I spent days planning this. Gary, I wanted something special for us, me. You, Rachel, and your parents together? He let out a breath as if trying to remain patient. But it's just a meal, Helen. Don't make a scene. We'll celebrate some other time, a scene? The words echoed in her mind. Was wanting recognition now. Considered making a scene. She could feel tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but forced them back. Fine, she said in a measured tone. With shaking hands, she poured the batter onto the waffle iron, letting it sizzle. She felt numb, and yet a quiet sense of resolve was building. She didn't want to stand in the kitchen and watch her carefully planned brunch go to waste, just because nobody cared enough to show up. Rachel appeared next, hair pulled back in a high ponytail, all dressed up in a floral sundress. Bye, Mom, she called cheerfully. Don't forget, Chessie needs to be walked twice a day if you're taking her next weekend. Thanks so much. You're a lifesaver. Helen stared at her daughter, mouth slightly open. Rachel was heading out on Mother's Day, not even offering a quick bite of the waffles. Helen began summoning the courage to voice her hurt. Did you at least pick up a card or something for me? Rachel frowned as if the question itself was baffling Mom. You know, I appreciate everything you do, but come on, it's just a day. Besides, we can celebrate next week. Love you with that. She swung the door open and a rush of spring air flooded the kitchen. Then she was gone, leaving Helen with the warm waffle iron in one hand and tears threatening to spill in the other. Helen placed the waffle iron on the counter, unplugged it, and let her gaze fall on the empty dining table. The plates were set fresh flowers, arranged in a small vase, fruit salad chilling in the fridge. She slid into a chair and stared at the table, letting silence drape around her. A day that was supposed to honor motherhood had turned into a reminder of how invisible she felt Gary was in the next room, probably flipping through channels or checking sports scores on his phone. Arthur and May were nowhere to be seen, perhaps having forgotten the brunch entirely, or simply taking for granted that Helen would handle everything. Helen closed her eyes, inhaling the faint orange scent from the batter. There was a time when this scenario would have left her crushed, but a different emotion was taking root inside her. It was anger, quiet, contained, but undeniably there. She stood up, grabbed her keys and purse, and slipped out the door without a word to Gary. The mid-morning sun warmed her shoulders as she walked to her car. She had no plan other than to get away from the house. Behind the wheel, she found herself driving aimlessly through the neighborhood, past neatly manicured lawns and families who were no doubt celebrating in their own ways. She pictured mothers receiving flowers, handwritten cards, maybe even a cup of coffee in bed. That wasn't her life anymore if it ever truly had been. Eventually, she pulled into a small park near the Willamette River parking beneath a blossoming cherry tree. She stepped out and breathed in the fragrant air. She found an empty bench overlooking the water, where joggers, dog walkers, and couples strolled by in lively conversation. Sitting there felt surreal, as though she was stepping outside her own story to observe a different world, one where people took the time to appreciate each other. Her phone buzzed in her purse. For a moment, she thought about ignoring it, but habit made her check. It was her mother, Dolores, calling, swallowing a mix of relief and guilt. She answered, "Happy Mother's Day." Honey Dolores' gentle voice greeted her. "I've been trying to call since last night. Everything okay?" Helen tried to keep her tone light, but the quiver returned. "Happy Mother's Day." "Mom, sorry, I was just busy in the kitchen. How's the celebration going? Are Gary's parents over?" Dolores asked, a hint of cautious hope in her tone. Helen exhaled, fighting back tears. "It's, not really happening the way I planned." She explained the fiasco, Gary's indifference, Rachel's abrupt departure, and how she was now sitting alone in a park, wondering why she'd ever hoped for more. Dolores let out a soft sigh. "Oh, my dear, I'm so sorry. You deserve better. You know, if you ever need to get away, my door's open." Helen listened to her mother's voice, each word like a soothing balm. Dolores had always been a steady presence, though thousands of miles separated them. "I appreciate that, Mom," Helen replied, her throat tight. I don't know what to do anymore. It feels like nobody even sees me." Dolores's reply came gently. "Well, you've given so much of yourself to that household. It might be time to remember who you are outside of being a wife and a mother." The words hit Helen like a gust of wind, refreshing yet startling. She realized she didn't have an immediate answer. Who was she if not Gary's wife, or Rachel's mom, or Arthur and May's dutiful daughter-in-law? Did she even have her own identity left to reclaim? After ending the call, Helen took a moment to watch the shimmering ripples on the water. Then she scrolled through her phone's news feed, stumbling upon an article about transformational solo retreats and how some women found empowerment by traveling alone. The idea seemed radical for someone like Helen, who'd rarely taken a trip without family in tow. Her mind flicked back to Dolores's invitation. But Dolores lived in a small apartment. There wouldn't be much space for Helen to truly find herself amid the daily routines they'd fall into. Helen felt a sudden urge to travel further, to break out of the bubble she'd been confined to. She recalled the time she'd seen pictures of her neighbor's vacation in Bali, lush green rice terraces, tranquil beaches, and yoga retreats. She wasn't a yoga person per se, but something about that distant island had always captivated her. She typed Bali retreat into her phone's search engine and began scrolling through images of vibrant temples, serene rice paddies, and smiling travelers. It was an entire world away from her quiet corner of Oregon, physically and metaphorically. Just as she began to entertain the notion of actually booking a trip, her phone pinged with another notification, an automated message from her bank alerting her of a recent deposit. The deposit was from Dolores. She blinked, heart pounding. $20,000. She hastily dialed her mother's number again. "Mom, what is this?" Helen asked, voice trembling with shock. Dolores sounded calm. "I sold the ranch land a while back. You know that I've been holding on to some of that money for you, Helen. I know you might not think you need it, but consider it my gift, no strings attached." Helen's eyes filled with tears. Mom, that's so much. I can't just. You can and you will. Dolores insisted. Use it for whatever sets you free, my girl. Travel, take classes, open that bakery you used to talk about anything. Helen swallowed hard, wiping at her cheeks. The breezy park air felt suddenly electric around her. Could she truly just take the money and leave? The idea of stepping on a plane alone heading to Bali seemed outlandish, yet in that very moment, it also felt like an invitation to reclaim a part of herself she'd long lost. Later that evening, after much pacing and a quiet dinner alone, Gary had gone out to watch a sports game with friends. Helen sat at her computer. She typed in flights from Portland to Bali and watched as the screen filled with options. Her heart fluttered wildly, torn between fear and excitement. She thought of Rachel's casual dismissal, Gary's shrug, the in-laws' criticisms, and then she thought of Dolores's words. Remember who you are outside of being a wife and a mother. She chose a flight for the following week, booking a small boutique-style retreat nestled near Ubud. It boasted a focus on wellness, creativity, and self-discovery, exactly what Helen felt she needed. With a few keystrokes, her entire life's trajectory shifted. She shut the laptop and stared at the dark reflection of herself on the blank screen, hardly recognizing the woman who had just purchased a one-way ticket to an island halfway around the world. The days leading up to the trip were a blur. Gary barely noticed her discreet preparations. He was bogged down with overtime at work, and when he was home, he mostly complained about the neighbors' tree branches hanging over their fence. Rachel was busy planning her New Orleans trip, occasionally texting Helen about picking up Chessie or dropping off laundry. Every text made Helen's heart clench. She said nothing about her own impending departure. On the night before her flight, Helen placed a single note on the kitchen table. It wasn't a grand announcement. It simply read, "I've gone to find myself. I need space. Please don't worry. I'll be safe." She felt that was enough. She didn't want fights or attempts to stop her. If Gary or Rachel cared to follow up, they could call. But deep down, Helen suspected they might not even notice she was missing, at least not for a while. The next morning, just before dawn, she loaded a single suitcase into her car and drove off. The rising sun painted the sky in hues of purple and orange, a silent promise of a new beginning. She pulled into the airport parking lot, heart thumping in her chest, mind racing with questions. Am I being reckless? Will they hate me? Is this a betrayal or the first step in saving myself? Yet, as she stepped into the terminal and checked in for her flight, a strange calmness washed over her. She texted Dolores a quick goodbye. Thanking her for the gift, Dolores replied instantly with a simple line, "I'm proud of you, honey. You deserve happiness." Helen's lips curved into a rare, genuine smile. Thank you for following Helen's journey so far. I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you think Helen is making the right choice? If you're enjoying the story, consider dropping a comment or subscribing for more tales of empowerment. Your feedback fuels these stories and helps them grow. Helen's journey to Bali took nearly a full day, with a layover in Tokyo that felt like stepping into another dimension. Bright neon signs and tidy shops selling sushi and gadgets greeted her, a stark contrast to her home life back in Oregon. By the time she landed at Denpasar International Airport, exhaustion wrestled with exhilaration in her chest. The warm, humid air hit her face as she exited the terminal. The sky, a vivid tapestry of clouds tinted by the setting sun. She was greeted by a smiling driver from the retreat center who held up a sign with her name, Ms. Helen Brooks. That single courtesy, seeing her name held up for the first time in what felt like decades, stirred a lump in her throat. She gave the driver a polite nod, and soon they were weaving through the busy streets of Bali, passing scooters loaded with families, street stalls selling satay, and ornate temples adorned with offerings of flowers and incense. They arrived in Ubud after dusk had settled, Helen watched in awe as the car moved past lush green rice terraces that glowed under the moonlight. The retreat center itself was a compound of small wooden villas linked by stone paths and surrounded by frangipani trees. Each villa had a porch where guests could sit on a rattan chair and breathe in the tropical night air. Helen's villa overlooked a small lotus pond with a single lantern lighting the path. A petite woman named Nadia greeted Helen with a flower garland. "Welcome to your new sanctuary," she said warmly. Nadia explained the retreat's offerings: yoga classes at sunrise, guided meditation sessions, cooking workshops, highlighting Balinese cuisine, and even painting lessons for those who wanted to explore their artistic side. Helen's heart fluttered at the mention of painting. She'd forgotten her old love for watercolor landscapes. The villa itself was minimalist yet soothing: white walls, mosquito netting around the bed, and large windows that let in the gentle hum of cicadas. Helen set her suitcase by the bed and took a moment to just breathe. She texted Dolores that she'd arrived safely, then powered off her phone. She wanted to detach from the outside world and any potential messages from Gary, Rachel, or the in-laws. Fatigue tugged at her eyelids, but she was too excited to sleep. Stepping out onto the porch, she inhaled the fragrant night air. Stars shimmered in the inky sky, unmasked by city lights. She could almost feel her anxiety draining away, replaced by a cautious optimism. This was her chance to remember who she once was, or discover who she could become. The choices lay before her as infinite as the stars above. For the first time in years, she felt a surge of possibility pulsing in her veins. Morning arrived with the sound of distant roosters and the faint chanting from a nearby temple. Helen woke up before the alarm she'd set, feeling both disoriented and oddly at peace. She pulled aside the gauzy curtains to see early sunlight filtering through the palm trees. In the soft glow, the lotus pond shimmered with droplets of dew, and the air smelled of wet earth and frangipani blossoms. Following Nadia's instructions, Helen made her way to the open-air pavilion where the sunrise yoga class took place. She wasn't sure if she was the yoga type, having only tried it once at a local gym years ago, but she felt compelled to give everything a chance here. The instructor, a tall Balinese man named K-Toot, guided the small group through a series of gentle stretches and breathing exercises. Helen felt awkward at first, struggling to mimic the others' fluid movements, but K-Toot smiled kindly and adjusted her posture, never making her feel self-conscious. By the end of the session, Helen's muscles hummed with a pleasant ache and her mind felt clear. She realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd done something purely physical for herself. Usually, if she exercised, it was out of duty to stay healthy, for the family, not out of personal enjoyment. After yoga, the retreat provided a traditional Balinese breakfast of nasi goreng fried rice, topped with a fried egg, along with fresh fruit and spicy sambal. The flavors startled Helen's taste buds in the best way. Each bite a reminder that the world outside her comfort zone could be delightful. She found herself seated next to Sandra, a retired social worker from Minnesota who was traveling solo much like Helen. Sandra had short curly hair and a warm smile, and within minutes they were chatting about everything from the flight to the retreat to their reasons for coming. "I just needed a break from the noise," Sandra confided. "After years of solving other people's problems, I realized I never solved my own." Helen nodded, feeling an instant camaraderie. "I think that's exactly why I'm here. I've been so busy being someone for everybody else, I forgot to be me." They laughed softly at the similarity of their stories, then parted ways to explore the day's schedule. Helen noticed a painting workshop at 11 in the morning, and her heart gave a small leap. She hadn't painted since she was in her 20s, back when Rachel was still in diapers. Could she still even hold a brush properly? Still, the thought of swirling colors on canvas felt liberating. "It's time to remember," she murmured to herself, heading back to her villa for a quick shower and a change of clothes. The painting workshop was held in a small gazebo near a quiet corner of the retreat center. Large canvases rested on wooden easels, and a gentle breeze stirred the leaves overhead. Helen arrived to find a handful of other guests already there. Some had clearly painted before, judging by their confident brush strokes, while others giggled nervously as they tried to mix colors. A local artist named Putu led the session, her soft voice guiding them in choosing their subjects. Bali is full of inspiration, she told the group. Maybe you want to paint the rice fields or the way the sunlight catches on a temple carving, or perhaps it's something inside you, a feeling that wants to be set free. Helen hesitated, her gaze drifting from the lush foliage around them to the blank canvas in front of her. She dipped her brush into a swirl of green paint, recalling the color of Oregon's fir trees, but also the vivid hue of rice paddies in the tropics. Her brush quivered slightly as she made the first stroke. It felt clumsy, but also thrilling, like rediscovering a hidden talent she'd buried long ago. As she painted, her mind wandered to memories of her younger self, Helen at 21, brimming with hopes of attending art school, but too scared to tell her parents. Helen at 28, newly married, who wondered if maybe she could sell a few watercolor landscapes at a local fair, but gave up when Gary said it might be a waste of time. Helen at 35, exhausted from mothering a spirited young Rachel who never found the energy to pick up a brush. Now at 54, she was finally dipping back into those vibrant colors. The years melted away with each stroke, leaving behind a sense of liberation. She wasn't alone in this rejuvenation. She caught Sandra's eye and exchanged a smile, and on her left was a middle-aged couple from California painting side by side, whispering words of encouragement to each other. It struck Helen how supportive people could be when they shared a common goal of healing or self-discovery. This was a stark contrast to the environment she'd left behind, where every moment felt overshadowed by criticism or disinterest. By the end of the session, Helen's canvas depicted a sunlit path through a grove of coconut trees, loosely inspired by the images she'd glimpsed on her way in from the airport. The colors bled and mingled in places imperfect yet alive. Putu walked by, observing each painting with a quiet smile. When she reached Helen, she whispered, "Beautiful. The light in your painting is gentle but strong. Keep going." A warmth spread through Helen's chest that had nothing to do with the tropical climate. It was the glow of validation of hearing that her efforts mattered. As she packed up her brushes, she realized she couldn't wait to paint again. There was a hunger inside her now, a desire to create, to express, and to breathe life back into the pieces of her soul she'd neglected for decades. That afternoon, Helen wandered the retreat grounds, letting curiosity guide her. A narrow path led to a small pond where pink lotus flowers bloomed around carved stone statues. The air was rich with the scent of incense drifting from a nearby shrine. She took a seat on a stone bench, letting the peacefulness seep into her bones. Her mind started sifting through the changes unfolding in her life, half wondering if she'd wake up tomorrow to find it all a dream. But everything felt so vibrantly real here, the humidity pressing on her skin, the chirping of cicadas, the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. A pang of guilt nudged at her. What about Gary, Rachel, Arthur, and May? Had they found her note yet? Were they worried or simply annoyed? Did they wonder if she was safe, or were they just inconvenienced by her sudden disappearance? She contemplated turning her phone on to check messages, but a surge of apprehension kept her from doing so. She wasn't ready to deal with the guilt trips or the pleas to come back home and resume her duties. Instead, she leaned forward and plucked a small piece of moss from the edge of the bench. Rubbing it between her fingers, she whispered to herself, "You're allowed to take up space in this world. Helen, you're allowed to breathe." The words felt foreign, as though she were repeating a line from someone else's life coaching tape, but at the same time they felt powerfully necessary. She was indeed allowed to exist beyond her roles of wife, mother, and daughter-in-law. A gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. "Helen," she looked up to see Nadia standing there holding a tray with 2 cups of ginger tea. "I thought you might like some refreshment. Mind if I join you?" Helen smiled, gesturing to the bench. Nadia sat down and handed her one of the cups. The ginger's spicy warmth mingled with the sweet aroma of honey. Nadia took a sip, then asked softly, "How are you finding Bali so far?" "It's beautiful," Helen answered. "I never knew I could feel so calm." Nadia nodded. "It's a special place. We like to say that Bali calls those who need healing. Perhaps you needed this place as much as it needed you." Helen's eyes grew misty. "You have no idea how much I needed it." Nadia offered a comforting smile. "Take your time here. Explore, heal. Create. The rest of the world can wait." Helen returned, Nadia's smile touched by the simple sincerity. She wondered how many years it had been since someone had given her permission so openly to focus on her own well-being. Over the next few days, Helen settled into a gentle rhythm that felt a world apart from her old life. She rose with the sun for yoga, letting the soft rays warm her skin, and the morning breeze fill her lungs with fresh air. Afterward, she treated herself to breakfast. Fruit salads bursting with color she rarely saw back home, coconut-infused pastries that tasted like sunshine, and freshly pressed juices with hints of ginger and turmeric. She also dove deeper into the painting sessions, sometimes joining Putu's workshops, other times sitting alone by the lotus pond or near the rice terraces with her sketchbook. The physical act of painting unleashed a swirl of buried emotions in her. On one canvas, she found herself painting a silhouette of a house on a hill reminiscent of her home in Oregon, but enveloped in a dreamy haze. In another, she painted a young woman walking down a beach at sunset, unsure if she was depicting her younger self or Rachel. Each brushstroke felt cathartic, as though she was unearthing fragments of her identity she'd stifled for years outside the art studio. She made new friends among the retreat guests. Sandra became a comforting presence, someone Helen could talk to without the weight of judgment or history. They shared stories of their families, the joys and disappointments that brought them to Bali. Occasionally, they ventured into town together, sampling local fare from small warangs or marveling at the intricate carvings in ancient temples. One day, while sipping tea in the retreat's communal lounge, Sandra told Helen about the day she decided to leave her marriage. "I realized I didn't recognize myself anymore. I'd built my life around someone else's blueprint," Sandra said, her eyes glistening with tears. She made no effort to hide. "Don't wait as long as I did if you know something's broken. It's okay to set it down." Helen had never openly considered divorce before. The mere thought ignited a swarm of butterflies in her stomach, but as she reflected on Gary's apathy, Rachel's dismissiveness, and the constant criticisms from Arthur and May, she couldn't deny that something was indeed broken. Could she set it down? She decided to turn on her phone that evening, if only to check messages from Dolores and confirm she was still on the planet. But her heart thundered in her chest at the prospect of seeing notifications from her family. She picked a quiet moment under a balmy evening sky, the crickets singing their nightly chorus. Taking a deep breath, she powered on her phone. There were multiple texts and missed calls from Gary, each more annoyed than the last. "Helen, where are you?" "Helen, this is insane. Are you just going to ignore me?" There was a voice message, too, which she hesitated to open. Rachel's messages were fewer but more pointed. "Mom, if you needed space, you could have just said something. By the way, Chessie is lonely. Are you coming back soon?" Helen's thumb hovered over the play button for Gary's voicemail. She tapped it, wincing as his voice crackled through. His tone was clipped, almost seething with impatience. "Helen, enough is enough. This stunt has gone on long enough. If you're trying to prove a point, you've made it. Now come home. There's a pile of laundry, and Rachel's complaining about you leaving her dog-sitting plans up in the air. Let's be adults about this." Her chest tightened. Everything in that message boiled down to tasks left undone, inconvenience caused, and an assumption that her actions were childish. "Let's be adults about this." The line stung her more than she expected. She couldn't help thinking how adult it was to realize her own mental health was worth preserving, that walking away from neglect was a mature decision, not a tantrum. Scrolling further, she found an email from Gary marked urgent. When she opened it, she felt the blood drain from her face. He threatened legal action if she didn't return, claiming she'd abandoned her marital responsibilities. He also insinuated that the money Dolores gave her was marital property. Helen's anger flared. How dare he? Dolores's money was a personal gift, something her mother had saved up to give her daughter a chance at a better life. She glanced at the time, late evening in Bali, early morning in Oregon. She decided to call Dolores instead of Gary. Her mother picked up on the first ring. "Helen, sweetie, how are you?" Dolores asked, relief evident in her voice. "Mom, I'm okay," Helen replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "But Gary's threatening to claim your gift as marital property? He's angry I left without explaining. I just, I can't handle going back there." Dolores exhaled, her tone turning steely. "He won't get a penny of it. That money is in your name and I have all the documentation. Helen, you do what you need to do to protect yourself. If that means a lawyer, then so be it." Helen wiped a tear. "I feel like I'm betraying him, betraying Rachel." "Stop, honey," Dolores interrupted gently. "You've betrayed no one. You've given them decades of your life. If they never made space for your happiness, that's on them, not you. You have a right to live freely." After the call, Helen sat in the darkness of her villa, illuminated only by a small bedside lamp. The mosquito net around her bed fluttered with the breeze. She realized she was facing a precipice. She could attempt to go back, apologize for leaving slip back into the shadows of her old life, or she could stand her ground, maybe even file for divorce. Words that still felt almost taboo to say out loud, and fight for her right to live without constant disregard. She flicked through her phone contacts until she found an old friend, Lisa Cohen, who was now a practicing family lawyer in Seattle. They hadn't spoken in years, but Lisa had once told her, "If you ever need help getting out, call me." Helen typed a hesitant message to Lisa. "Hi, Lisa, it's Helen Brooks. Yes, from college. I'm in Bali right now, and I might need your legal advice about a separation or divorce. Let me know if you can talk soon." Her finger hovered over the send button for a split second before she pressed it, heart pounding. Immediately, she felt a swirl of fear and relief. The line was crossed. She was acknowledging, at least privately, that her marriage might be over. She pressed her phone to her chest, gazing at the half-finished painting propped on the desk across the room. It portrayed an abstract silhouette of a woman stepping off a ledge into a vast sky, as if about to take flight. The image felt deeply personal, a reflection of the choice Helen was making. Exhausted, she lay down on the bed, the drone of cicadas lulling her into a restless sleep. She dreamed of a version of herself standing at the edge of the ocean, waves lapping at her feet. In the dream, Gary, Rachel, Arthur, and May stood behind her, calling out orders and demands she couldn't make out. She turned toward the sea, and just as she was about to walk in, she woke up with a start. Over the next few days, she found ways to ground herself in Bali's healing atmosphere. She joined a guided meditation session at a nearby temple, letting the rhythmic chanting soothe her frayed nerves. She signed up for a Balinese cooking class, discovering the joy of mixing fresh spices and coconut milk into vibrant curries. She and Sandra took a day trip to the Tagalalang rice terraces, marveling at the intricate layers of green that stretched across the hills. One afternoon, while exploring a local market, Helen couldn't resist the pull of a small art gallery tucked between souvenir stalls. Inside, vivid paintings of Balinese dancers and sprawling beaches adorned the walls. She found herself drawn to one particular piece, a portrait of a Balinese woman carrying a basket of fruit on her head, her expression calm but resolute. Helen bought it on impulse, feeling a kinship with that woman's steady determination. All this time, her phone stayed mostly off. She checked messages only sporadically enough to keep in touch with Dolores and watch for Lisa's reply. She glimpsed new texts from Gary, angrier, more threatening, and from Rachel, who seemed confused and inconvenienced, but not particularly concerned about Helen's emotional state. Helen swallowed back the pang of heartbreak each time she realized her daughter's focus was on the lost dog-sitting arrangement rather than her mother's well-being. Thanks for reading, dear friend. How are you feeling about Helen's journey so far? Your insights mean a lot. Leave a comment or subscribe to keep following her story. Let's continue to grow this supportive community together. Finally, Lisa responded with a succinct but supportive email. Helen, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I'm free to talk anytime. Just say the word, heart pounding. Helen arranged a video call from her villa one late afternoon. She shut the door, drew the curtains, and positioned her phone so that the background showed a serene Balinese garden rather than her own anxious face. Lisa appeared on the screen, her hair shorter than Helen remembered, but her expression just as empathetic. Helen, talk to me. How can I help? Helen took a shaky breath and summarized everything. The years of being dismissed, the abrupt departure, Gary's threats, and Dolores's gift. Lisa listened intently, her brow furrowing. You have grounds to file for divorce on multiple levels, she said plainly. Abandonment doesn't apply here if you left for valid emotional or psychological reasons, especially with the kind of neglect you're describing. As for your mother's money, that's a personal gift. If we document it properly, Gary can't touch it. Helen's shoulders sagged with relief. I'm so scared of the fallout, though. How will people see me? What if Rachel hates me? Lisa's voice softened. Helen, you can't live for how others see you. If Rachel truly loves you, she'll come around. This is about your well-being. You deserve to be recognized, to be valued. From what you've told me, that wasn't happening. Tears blurred Helen's vision. It wasn't. I felt like the housekeeper babysitter. Everything but never truly me. Lisa nodded. We can start the paperwork whenever you're ready. I'll need some documents, marriage certificate, your financials, proof of your mother's gift, etc. I can email you a list. Helen, this won't be easy, but it's your right. You're not doing anything wrong by choosing yourself. After the call ended, Helen felt both lighter and more terrified. Divorce. The word loomed in her mind. She'd seen couples split in her community, and it was almost always ugly whispers, gossip children forced to choose sides. But she realized that staying in a hollow marriage might be uglier in the long run, especially for her own sense of self. She decided to take a walk through the rice fields near the retreat to clear her head. Dusk was approaching and the sky glowed with shades of pink and orange. She admired the reflections in the watery paddies, each a mirror of the vibrant sky above. Farmers were winding down their day, some carrying tools across the narrow dikes. A group of ducks waddled through the shallow water, searching for insects. As she strolled, she replayed Lisa's words. It's your right to be valued. She thought back to the times Gary cut her off in conversation, or when Rachel referred to her as just Mom. She remembered Arthur and May's criticisms that chipped away at her dignity. This journey to Bali had shown her there was more to life than existing for others. She wanted to paint, to travel, to feel joy without guilt. Was that so wrong? Helen returned to her villa as the last traces of daylight faded into a soft, comforting darkness. She lit a small candle on the porch and opened her phone to draft an email to Lisa detailing the documents she could provide and asking how soon the process could begin. Each word felt surreal, but also empowering, like stepping onto a path she was meant to walk. Once the email was sent, she placed her phone aside and gazed at the painting she'd been working on earlier that day. It showed a woman seated at the edge of a cliff gazing at a distant horizon. The woman's posture was relaxed, even hopeful, as though she might stand up and embrace the vast sky at any moment. Helen realized it was a portrait of who she was becoming. She thought about Rachel, about the love she once poured into her daughter, about the memories of reading bedtime stories and teaching her to ride a bike. She let herself grieve the distance that now lay between them. Even so, she held a glimmer of hope that one day Rachel might see her not just as mom, but as a fully realized human being with her own dreams and needs. For tonight, though, Helen allowed herself to feel the satisfaction of making a choice, perhaps the boldest choice of her life. Outside, the cicadas sang their nightly song, and a gentle breeze carried the faint scent of blooming jasmine. Helen closed her eyes, breathing in the promise of a new chapter. The next morning, she'd wake up, roll out her yoga mat, and greet the sun once again. She might spend the afternoon painting or exploring another local temple, and maybe in a week or two, she'd fly back to Oregon for the court proceedings. Or maybe she'd handle some of them remotely while staying in Bali a bit longer. The details weren't fully ironed out, but that was okay. For the first time in decades, Helen felt she had the freedom to shape her own life day by day. She remembered Dolores's words, "I'm proud of you, honey. You deserve happiness." Repeating them quietly to herself, she allowed a soft smile to form on her lips. She deserved happiness. She always had. It was simply buried under the noise of other people's expectations. Yes, there would be challenges ahead. Gary's anger might escalate, Rachel might feel betrayed, and Arthur and May would likely cast blame. But Helen was no longer the subdued housewife who tiptoed around everyone else's emotions. She was Helen Brooks, a woman rediscovering herself under the Bali sun, a woman with a paintbrush in one hand and the future in the other. Closing her eyes, she whispered a silent thank you to the night sky. Tomorrow held endless possibilities, and she was ready at last to claim them. Wow, what an empowering journey we just experienced together. Helen's courageous decision to travel across the world, rediscover herself in Bali, and ultimately confront her own family's neglect truly touched my heart, and I hope it resonated deeply with you too. Stories like these remind us all that it's never too late to prioritize our own happiness and chase our dreams. But I'd really love to hear your perspective. Did Helen make the right choice? What would you have done in her shoes? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, along with where you're listening from. It's always amazing to see how far our stories reach. If you enjoyed today's heartfelt journey, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your support helps our Fireside community grow, bringing more beautiful, inspiring stories your way. Until next time, keep your hearts warm and your dreams alive, and I'll see you right here again soon on her Fireside Stories.